Welcome back to the Rock Room and another episode of the Rock Your Divorce podcast, where we help men successfully navigate the divorce process in a healthy way. I'm your host, Stephen Valente. If you're like me, you may be struggling with what is God's plan for this divorce in my life. You may be wondering, do I even have a purpose here on earth after this divorce is done? You may be feeling alone or abandoned by God. And lastly, you may have lost all hope and all faith in God altogether. If that sounds like you, then you are absolutely in the right place. Because in today's episode, I'm going to give you the top 10 reasons that Jesus is the ultimate rock star and how God has got you and your family, not only during this divorce process, but after you navigate it. If that sounds like something you're interested in, then plug in, turn it up, and let's hit the stage. As we discuss on the Rock Your Divorce podcast, there are 7 key areas of your life that if you just focus on them each and every day, you will be able to navigate this divorce process in a healthy way, and I promise you will be able to absolutely thrive afterwards. As I normally give a visual, the visual is that of a 7-channel mixing board or a soundboard. And each of those channels represents the individual 7 key areas of your life. And the faders within those channels is the amount of time or effort or energy and focus that you can give those each and every day. As I've said throughout the season of the podcast, it is virtually impossible to achieve what we're trying to achieve, and that is an equal balance among all 7 during this divorce process. So I encourage you, don't set yourself up for failure to think that if you are not managing each and every one of these aspects perfectly or balanced each and every day, that somehow or some way that you're failing. Right? The idea about the 7 key areas, and we've covered a good number of things that we can do here in the first season of Rock Your Divorce, is really trying to set yourself up with healthy patterns, healthy habits, healthy routines, getting yourself spiritually and mentally and emotionally ready, but also physically, right? Financially, professionally, and legally. All those aspects that we've talked about over the last now 22 episodes is really what Rock Your Divorce is about. So as I've said, here we are kind of closing out season 1, the first album of Rock Your Divorce. And I thought it would be very fitting that we return to the absolute most important fader, the most important part of your life, the first pillar, which is your spiritual. And that's really putting faith first. So above and beyond everything, I encourage you to take a look at your faith. Take a look at your belief in God. And really, I heard a saying one time that resonated with me, that you can do very little with faith, but you can do nothing without it. And that resonated with me, and that's kind of how, when we start this divorce process and you start wanting to heal, you want to get through it, first and foremost, but you want to heal and be the best possible man that you can be, the man that God created you to be, for yourself, for your children, for those that you love, and ultimately, if you want to end up with somebody else, either in a long-term relationship or marriage, that you will be that man, right? So it's got to start with your faith. It's got to start with your personal relationship with God. And I know, speaking for myself, the toughest parts of my life, as I look back all the way, to elementary school and middle school and definitely in college, when I went through some things, my relationship with God is the only way that I got through what I got through. And when I was going through, 2 years before I ended up filing for divorce, I struggled so deeply with the feelings that I mentioned in the opening of this podcast. Like why is God putting me and my family through all of this turmoil, right? Why are we going through this? What is the purpose of all of this? Will there be a reason to go on after? I asked myself so many questions leading up to that point. And as I've said in a couple previous episodes, I really struggled biblically with the fact that I was going to make a decision that was going to not only affect me and my marriage, but my children, our family, all of the surrounding family, the friends that we built over almost 22 years. And I struggled with that deeply because it went against what I thought I was supposed to do under the relationship with God. At the same time, too, I really felt like I was being led to this point based on the circumstances that we were going through at the time, and ultimately had to put my absolute trust and faith, completely surrender to God and His plan and His purpose for me and for the divorce and everything else that happened after. So, as I did that, and as I worked through all of those thoughts and feelings, I really saw during that 15-month process that our divorce took, God worked in me. And my relationship with God grew, my understanding. I felt like I grew not only spiritually as a person, but as a man, with strength and endurance and all of the things, mental fortitude and mental strength and all of that throughout the process. And a lot of that was because I was rooted 100% in my faith. I felt like it was my beginning and my end, right? It was my rock. It was my anchor. And I knew that it was going to touch every aspect of my life. The 7 key areas of life that we talk about each and every podcast episode. I knew that my faith, my belief in God and my strict love and appreciation for my relationship with Jesus Christ is what got me through everything that I had to go through. And it really kept me going in those times that I didn't think I could make it yet another day, right? I had this, unmatched, sometimes it felt like supernatural strength across all the key areas of my life. I felt like God was guiding my steps. He was leading the way. He was opening doors. He was closing doors. He was bringing people into my life. He was removing people from my life that needed to be removed, quite frankly. And it just felt like by completely and totally surrendering to what I felt like I was being led to do, that absolutely and totally I would get through it. And my children would get through it. And I would be a much stronger man by putting faith first, by leading my home, leading my family, leading my children by example, and becoming the strongest faith-filled man that I could be. And as I've told you before, and I have an episode in season 2 where we talk a little bit more about journaling that you'll see here in a couple weeks. But ultimately, as I said, I wrote almost 10 complete journals when I was going through my divorce. And I encourage each and every one of you to pick up journaling as a daily habit, right? It did so much for me in my life during that time. And you can go back and eventually watch the episode related to journaling and the why behind it. But again, ultimately, I ended up rereading those journals, not only for the divorce trial that we had, but in kind of, trying to relive and try to understand the man that started the process, as well as who the man was when it ended. And I've shared this story before, but I'll share it again. that as I was rereading the journals, there was one line in one of the journals that said I was talking about everything that we were going through. I was talking about some of the things that I felt like I was learning about myself and about the process and hopefully helping the kids out. And I had one line in there that said, when this is all said and done, and I'll paraphrase this, when this is all said and done, I need to either write a book or do a podcast so I can help just one man navigate this process in a healthy way. And I don't remember writing that line. In fact, I said I journaled so much. Sometimes it was hours in a day, depending on what happened, just to clear the thoughts from my mind, to try to make sense of everything that was going on. And seeing that line sparked something in me that ultimately became the Rock Room and Rock Your Divorce. And it kind of led me to this idea that I need to take what I know and I need to combine that with what I love and who I am. And I feel like that's music, rock music, and put it out for you as a man to find that there are others that are going through exactly the same things that you're going through right now, or that you will go through if you've just started the process. There are resources out here, and there are healthy ways, healthy habits, healthy routines that you can implement in your life each and every day that will not only help you get through this process, but I promise you that you will absolutely thrive after this divorce process is done. So that's what kind of led me to do this Rock Your Divorce. Again, it wasn't anything that I had planned, but as I read it and it sparked this thought in me, I really felt like this is something that I needed to do. So you fast forward, I spent, in essence, about 15 months leading up to the launch of Rock Your Divorce, which was November 17th. And, it's kind of one of these things where as we're now finishing the 22 episodes, and I have many other episodes planned and even already recorded and into the works, that, I hope that you have found some value in the first now 22 episodes. I hope that you found some things that you can take away. And one of those things that I want you to take away is that you must have faith first. You must have a personal relationship with God. And you must have that be your rock, your anchor, and everything that you do in your life, whether it's the man that you are, whether it's the father you are to your children, the business person or business owner for your company or for your employer, for the volunteer that you do in your community, the friends that you have, every aspect of your life. I want to encourage you to let your faith, your personal relationship with God, be that center, right, during this process, and have it grow so that when you exit this thing at the end, and you're going to exit, as I said before, this is only a short season of your life, right? This is not how your life is going to be in perpetuity. It may feel like that right now, because I know for me, it felt like, and I've talked about it in previous episodes, it felt like Groundhog Day. It felt like I was going through the same thing over and over again. I was circling this drain. I was reliving horrors that have going on each and every day in my life, and I never felt like I could get out of this until I put my faith and my belief that God had me. God had my family. He had a plan. He had a purpose. This is all for a reason. I don't know what it is, right? And to this day, I still don't know. But I have an unshakable faith that what me and my family went through there is a plan and there is a purpose for this. And ultimately, I will see that revealed when his promises to me are revealed, right? And I just have that faith in there. So my encouragement to you is keep going, have that faith. If you don't pray, I've got an episode on prayer. If you don't have a faith mentor, I've got an episode on getting a faith mentor. We're going to have more episodes about faith-based peer groups and getting involved in community and community service. We're going to have, those types of things when it comes to season 2. And the hope is that, we're going to have additional guests here that's going to open up your mind to other things, rather not just within your faith, but in all aspects of the 7 key areas of your life in season 2 and beyond. So with that being said, I really want to encourage you that, this is the time to build that relationship, that personal relationship, to strengthen your faith, to give absolute and 100% total control and surrender to God and his will for you and his plan for you. You have to do your part. This is not, you give it up and you stand there and wait. But you know exactly what you need to do. You know exactly where you need to go. And ultimately, if you don't, when you pray about it, God's going to speak to you. So that's my encouragement to you. So as we close out this episode number 22, the completion of the first album, 22 episodes of Rock Your Divorce, let's talk about the top 10 reasons that Jesus was the ultimate rock star. So as we talk about on this podcast, you are a rock star. In fact, there's an entire episode related to why I call you a rock star and why I call myself a rock star. But here are the top 10 reasons that Jesus is the ultimate rock star. So first, when you take a look at Jesus as compared to a rock star, rock stars are these charismatic leaders, right? They have this power, this influence, right? They can influence thousands and thousands of people when it comes to their live musical performances. And even if you take a look at musical performances or the music that they create, it reaches tens of millions outside of just those concerts. So, drawing massive crowds, having this message hit people from all walks of life, right? We're not, you go to a concert and it's amazing to see the difference in socio and economic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, right? Music has this beauty of bridging gaps amongst people. And, Jesus was the same way. He absolutely went out, demanded authority, right, with these messages, with his teachings. He could draw thousands in crowds, and he really brought people together from all walks of life. So, that charismatic leader, that influencer, so to speak, really fits him just like it fits rock stars. In speaking of his message, rock stars have this revolutionary message, right? They have this revolutionary, their music kind of cultivates this pushing of boundaries, right? If you take a look at kind of, especially like in the 60s and in the 70s, we had these bands that were going against, and we're going to talk about counterculture here in a second, but their music had this change in mind, changing the status quo. And Jesus's message and Jesus as a person really is no different. In fact, if you take a look at his message that he was preaching, it was one of love and it was one of forgiveness. And some of what he was teaching was absolutely against the religious law at the time, right? So he was challenging that status quo and he was pushing boundaries, and his messages were quite revolutionary, not only at the time, but if you to bring it all up to modern day, it still is that way. So Jesus was had a revolutionary message. I think the third thing, and we've talked about this in a previous episode about you as a man and what it means to have a legacy. Rock stars have legacies. Rock stars leave legacies, whether it's their music catalog, whether it's, causes that they may be a part of, like we've talked about a couple of them along the way, where musicians are involved in either, human rights or, environmental or, there's lots of different causes that music and musicians get involved in. But this is really about having an unparalleled legacy to leave the world. And even after a musician dies, this album or this catalog of music or their iconic image or the impact that they made to the world lives on beyond them. And, who's the only one to kind of, radically change history, radically change cultures, radically change music and art and all of these things surrounding Jesus's legacy, and that is one of love. And it's really, if you think about the impact that one man has had, albeit he is the Son of God, but just his presence coming down and those 33 years that he was here, everything that's come from that and changed that, the lives and the people that he's changed and continues to change every day, is really an enduring legacy to him. So that's kind of a comparison. I did mention the idea of a counterculture icon. In fact, again, movements, right? Like movements of music, whether that was rock and roll when it started, whether it was, moving into kind of that counterculture in the 60s and 70s, the anti-establishment type of role that music and musicians took at that time, or then moving into things like punk rock, right, where that was counterculture, and then heavy metal, and then grunge, right? Like we had all of these music movements that were really about rebellion and change. And if you take a look at some of those music genres that I just mentioned, I mean, the through line for that was rebellion and change. And that was very similar to kind of how Jesus was at his time. He was teaching rebellious teachings, right? He was asking people to look at things differently than what religious law had been established. And quite frankly, what he learned growing up as a Jew. So you had kind of this like anti-religious hierarchy movement going on. And that's not unlike some of the music movements that I mentioned, just a couple minutes ago. I mentioned in the legacy episode something about redemption and something about sacrifice, right? And when you take a look at yourself as a rock star and you take a look at rock stars in general, there's a redemption story that goes along with many, many musicians, many, many bands or performers, right? And that redemption story really takes a personal struggle that they have, whether that's alcoholism, whether that's drug addiction, whether that's mental health issues, right? And it takes a very private matter and turns it into public. And and if you take a look at sacrifice, I mean, there's no more ultimate sacrifice that was given to you or me to save us from sin, to keep us from eternal death, and that was Jesus' crucifixion. He gave his life so that we may have life now and in eternity. And the redemption story that goes along with some of these rock bands and musicians that pull themselves up and are resurrected, so to speak, in kind of a new way, equally parallels, not to the level, of course, but just that whole idea that Jesus was the ultimate rock star. He was the ultimate redemption story, and that was for us, right? So a lot of parallels there. I think in talking about the crucifixion and in talking about sacrifice and redemption, the other idea that kind of brings a parallel between Jesus as a rock star, as the ultimate rock star, versus rock stars that you and I normally know, is that of iconic symbolism, right? And I mentioned before, top hats are Guns N' Roses with Slash, or that Freddie Mercury, shadow where it's Freddie Mercury, it's the way he's standing, it's him holding his microphone, or there's just, there's a bunch of different cultural icons that but the symbolism related to Jesus, right? His cross, his crucifixion, some of the other things that go along in his life, his whole entire life was symbolic, right? So again, a comparison between, a rock star of today and Jesus as the ultimate rock star. A couple more that I thought about was a pretty easy one, right? I did a whole thing on fan club versus critics. And Jesus had devoted followers. In fact, Jesus still has devoted followers and will. I'm a devoted follower. Hopefully you're a devoted follower. But rock stars and rock bands have this, uncanny ability to draw people in and through their music, make that connection to them. And for me, I have, a handful of bands that I am just absolutely fans of, right? Their music helped kind of shape my youth growing up, or I even go back now and listen to certain bands, when I need to be motivated, or when I need to kind of pull myself out of something, or, when I want to relive a certain feeling or time in my life, right? We go to music that way. And though that's because I'm a devoted follower of the art and the music that was produced that connected with me. And if you think about Jesus as the ultimate rock star, I mean, that's what he does. He has followers. He has devoted followers. They connect with him and his message and his life, and ultimately what he did for us by giving up his life. So again, rock stars have fan clubs and devoted followers, and so does Jesus. I think, kind of going back to one of the topics that we touched on about Jesus's message it really appeals across different cultures and different peoples, of the world. And although you may not be a Christian, or there may be, other religions, other faiths out there, there's no doubt that Jesus had an impact on cultures, continues to have impact on cultures, even if they're not Christian. And I think that's, kind of one of these enduring messages that he leaves, is that even those that do not follow him, know of his message, and know what he did for the world. It's just ultimately up to them to accept him or not. I think, when you look at Jesus and compare him to rock stars, this whole idea of a rock star being controversial kind of going back to the counterculture idea, kind of going back to the challenging of the status quo, maybe being rebellious and all of that goes along with it. And, Jesus was the ultimate rebellion and the ultimate controversy because he claimed to be the Son of God. Now, if you or I walked around today saying that we were the Son of God, I think that, on one aspect of it, people would look at us and think that maybe we had a mental illness or that something was going on, or they would laugh it off, right? Of course. But think about back in the day that Jesus was doing this, religion and faith and all of this stuff was based on the Old Testament, and that they were waiting for the Son of God to come back and to deliver them. And so here he is up there, and people knew him. People knew him when he was growing up. People knew him from when he was young. And they're thinking like, I knew you when you were a toddler. Like, what do you mean you're the Son of God, right? So he was controversial then. I would even argue that he's probably more controversial now. I think that if you're a Christian and you speak your faith, you speak your truth, especially out in public these days or on social media, it's kind of not the thing to do, right? There's enough people out there in the world that don't want to hear your message, especially if it differs from theirs. We won't go into, to politics or anything else like that. But I think, going back and looking at Jesus's message of love, forgiveness, and for what he did for you and for me, he is still as controversial today, if not more, than he was back in his time. And lastly, I think if you want to look at Jesus as the ultimate rock star compared to the real kind of modern day rock stars in music, it's inspiration. They're inspirational, right? The music that they create, the art that they create, music moves people. Music, pulls emotions out, good or bad, right or wrong, emotions, right? It puts us back to, as I said before, where we were at a certain time or who we were with at a certain time, right? So music has that capability of bringing inspiration and truly impacting our lives. So that's the 10 reasons that I say that Jesus is the ultimate rock star, and there is and will be no other rock star like Jesus until he comes back. So that's it for today's episode. Again, if there's anything that I've said that either strikes a chord with you or resonates with you, I encourage you to go to www.rockyourdivorce.com, schedule a free 30-minute phone call with me, because I know that I can help you through this divorce process and help you thrive afterwards. While you're there, please like and subscribe to the Rock Your Divorce podcast. And if you know a man who's either starting the divorce process, or maybe he's kind of going through it right now, or he's recently been divorced and out of it, but he's just not healing or thriving yet, I encourage you to share the Rock Your Divorce podcast with him. Send him here to the Rock Room so that we can help him navigate this process in a healthy way. Well, that closes out season number 1, album number 1 of the Rock Your Divorce podcast. And I look forward to seeing you here for season 2 next time.